There's a paradox that exists in the spiritual world that almost no one talks about openly. You've done the inner work, you've had your awakening, you've felt the profound shifts in consciousness, and yet something still feels off. It's like standing at the edge of a beautiful lake, knowing you can swim, but your feet remain glued to the shore. You know you've transformed on some level, but daily life still feels heavy, still feels limited, still feels like you're operating from an old version of yourself that no longer fits who you've become. This isn't about needing more healing or going deeper into your spiritual practice. This is about something far more subtle and far more common than most spiritual teachers will admit. It's about the gap between spiritual realization and human integration, and it's keeping millions of awakened souls trapped in a state of spiritual limbo without them even realizing it. If you've ever felt like you're living two lives, one where you know your true nature and another where you're still reacting from old patterns, this is for you. Because what's happening isn't a failure of your spiritual journey. It's actually a very specific stage that most people don't recognize, and once you understand it, everything changes. The awakening happened. You felt it. Maybe it came through meditation, maybe through crisis, maybe through a gradual opening that built over months or years. But there was that moment, or series of moments, where you touched something beyond your ordinary sense of self. You experienced your connection to something larger, felt the illusion of separation dissolve, and glimpsed the profound peace that exists beneath the surface of everyday consciousness. In that space, you knew with absolute certainty that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not even your personal history. You touched the timeless awareness that has always been there, watching, knowing, simply being. It was real. It was profound. It changed something fundamental about how you see yourself and reality. But then you had to come back to human life. You had to return to paying bills, dealing with relationships, managing your health, navigating work, and handling all the practical aspects of being a person in the world. And this is where the confusion begins, because the consciousness that touched infinite awareness still has to operate through a human nervous system, a human brain, and human emotions that were formed long before your awakening occurred. You might notice that you can access states of deep peace and expanded awareness during meditation. But the moment you engage with certain people or situations, you're back to feeling reactive, defensive, or overwhelmed. You might find yourself knowing profound spiritual truths intellectually and experientially, yet still feeling anxious about money, still getting triggered in relationships, still experiencing waves of depression or anger that seem to come from nowhere. This creates a strange kind of internal split. Part of you knows your infinite consciousness having a human experience, while another part of you still feels limited, still feels separate, still operates from survival patterns that made sense before your awakening, but now feel completely misaligned with who you know yourself to be. Most people interpret this as evidence that their awakening wasn't real, or that they need to go deeper, or that they're somehow failing at being spiritual. But what if this experience is actually completely normal and represents a very specific phase of spiritual development that hardly anyone talks about? The human brain is essentially a prediction machine. It takes past experiences and uses them to anticipate and prepare for future situations. This served our ancestors well when survival depended on quickly recognizing and responding to potential threats. But this same mechanism becomes problematic when you've had a profound shift in consciousness, because your brain is still operating from pre-awakening data. Think about it this way. Your awakening might have shown you that you are fundamentally safe, that you are connected to an infinite source of love and wisdom, that separation is an illusion. But your brain still has decades of neural pathways that were formed when you believed you were separate, vulnerable, and dependent on external circumstances for your well-being. These neural pathways don't just disappear because you've had a spiritual realization. They continue to fire automatically, creating thoughts, emotions, and reactions that feel completely out of alignment with your awakened understanding. Your awakened consciousness might know that you are worthy of love exactly as you are, but your brain might still generate thoughts like, I'm not good enough, or I need to prove my worth, because those pathways were reinforced for years before your awakening. This is why you can feel spiritually awakened and still experience anxiety, depression, relationship conflicts, or any number of human challenges. It's not because your awakening wasn't real. It's because awakening is just the beginning of a much longer process of integration. Your consciousness has expanded, but your human operating system is still running on old software. And until that software gets updated, you're going to experience this frustrating gap between what you know to be true spiritually and how you actually feel and behave in your daily life. The good news is that understanding this process is the first step toward bridging that gap. Once you realize that this disconnection is temporary and completely workable, you can begin the real work of integration with much more patience and compassion for yourself. Integration is where the real transformation happens. It's not enough to have profound spiritual experiences if those experiences don't translate into a more peaceful, authentic, and fulfilling way of living. Integration is the process of allowing your awakened consciousness to gradually restructure your human experience from the inside out. This happens on multiple levels simultaneously. There's mental integration, where your thoughts and beliefs begin to align with your expanded awareness. There's emotional integration, where your feeling responses become more balanced and less reactive. There's physical integration, where your body learns to hold and express higher frequencies of consciousness. And there's behavioral integration, where your actions in the world begin to reflect your spiritual understanding. Each of these levels moves at its own pace and requires different kinds of attention and care. You might find that your mental understanding shifts relatively quickly, but your emotional reactions take much longer to transform. Or you might discover that your body needs specific practices to help it adjust to your expanded awareness. The key is recognizing that integration is not a linear process. You don't simply move from unawakened to awakened to integrated in a straight line. Instead, it's more like a spiral where you revisit similar themes and challenges at deeper levels, each time with greater wisdom and capacity to transform them. You might think you've fully integrated a particular pattern, only to have it resurface weeks or months later. This doesn't mean you've regressed. It means you're ready to work with that pattern at an even deeper level. Each spiral brings you closer to authentic embodiment of your awakened consciousness. One of the most challenging aspects of this phase is that you can no longer pretend you don't know what you know. Before awakening, you could attribute your suffering to external circumstances. You could believe that changing your job, your relationship, your living situation, or your financial status would solve your problems. But awakening reveals that your experience of life is generated from within, and this knowledge comes with both tremendous freedom and tremendous responsibility. You realize that you are the creator of your experience, which means you can no longer blame anyone or anything else for how you feel. This can initially feel overwhelming because it means that every moment of suffering, every reaction, every limitation you experience is somehow your own creation. But it also means that you have far more power to transform your experience than you ever imagined. This responsibility can create its own form of suffering if you approach it with judgment rather than compassion. You might catch yourself having a reactive response to someone and immediately judge yourself for not being more awakened. You might notice fear arising and feel frustrated that you're still operating from such a limited perspective. But self-judgment only creates more separation and actually slows down the integration process. The part of you that judges your human reactions is often the ego trying to maintain control by creating a spiritual identity that's superior to your ordinary human experience. True integration requires embracing both your infinite nature and your human limitations with equal compassion. This means learning to witness your patterns without immediately trying to fix or change them. It means developing the capacity to hold space for your fears, your anger, your sadness, and your confusion as natural parts of the human experience that don't negate your spiritual realization. As you practice this kind of compassionate witnessing, something beautiful begins to happen. The patterns you've been struggling with start to transform naturally, not because you're forcing them to change, but because they're being held in the light of your awakened awareness. The nervous system plays a crucial role in this integration process that most spiritual teachings completely overlook. Your nervous system is the bridge between consciousness and physical experience, and it needs specific support to handle the expanded frequencies of awakened awareness. Before awakening, your nervous system was calibrated to a certain range of experience. It knew how to handle the familiar ups and downs of ordinary consciousness. But awakened awareness operates at much higher frequencies, and your nervous system needs time to adjust and recalibrate to these new energetic realities. This is why many people experience physical symptoms during the integration phase. You might feel more sensitive to crowds, loud noises, or chaotic environments. You might need more rest, more time in nature, or more gentle movement practices. You might find that your body craves different foods or that your sleep patterns change dramatically. These aren't signs that something is wrong. They're signs that your system is upgrading itself to accommodate your expanded consciousness. Just like when you update the software on your computer and it needs to restart and recalibrate, your human system needs time and support to integrate the new frequencies you're accessing. Practices that support nervous system integration include breathwork, gentle yoga, time in nature, mindful movement, bodywork, and any activity that helps you feel grounded and present in your physical form. The key is listening to what your body needs rather than forcing it to conform to external spiritual practices that might not be appropriate for your current integration process. Your relationships become a powerful mirror during this integration phase, often revealing exactly where you're still operating from pre-awakening patterns. The people closest to you knew you before your awakening, and they're often unconsciously invested in keeping you the same because change in one person naturally affects the entire relational dynamic. You might find that conversations that used to feel normal now feel draining or superficial. You might notice that certain people seem to trigger reactive responses in you that feel completely out of proportion to what's actually happening. You might discover that you're no longer interested in activities or social gatherings that used to bring you pleasure. This can create feelings of loneliness and disconnection, especially if the people in your life don't understand what you're going through. They might perceive your changes as rejection or judgment of them, which can create conflict and distance in relationships that were previously stable and comfortable. The temptation during this phase is to either completely isolate yourself from people who don't understand your spiritual journey, or to try to convince them to join you in your awakening process. Neither approach tends to work very well. Isolation cuts you off from the very relationships that could support your integration, while trying to awaken others often creates resistance and conflict. Instead, the invitation is to learn how to maintain your center while engaging with people who are operating from different levels of consciousness. This requires developing strong energetic boundaries, practicing compassionate detachment, and finding ways to love people exactly as they are while not compromising your own spiritual integrity. Sometimes this means having difficult conversations about how your needs and interests have changed. Sometimes it means spending less time with certain people while you integrate your new awareness. And sometimes it means discovering that some relationships naturally fall away, while new ones that are more aligned with your current consciousness begin to emerge. The key is approaching all of these relational shifts with as much love and understanding as possible, both for others and for yourself. Remember that everyone is exactly where they need to be in their own spiritual journey, and your job is not to awaken anyone else, but simply to embody your own awakening as authentically as possible. One of the most confusing aspects of the integration phase is that your sense of purpose and meaning often goes through a complete reorganization. The goals and ambitions that used to motivate you might suddenly feel empty or meaningless. Career paths that once excited you might feel misaligned with your values. Activities that used to bring you satisfaction might leave you feeling restless and unfulfilled. This can create a crisis of direction where you know you've outgrown your old way of being in the world, but you're not yet clear about what wants to emerge in its place. You might feel like you're in a void, no longer motivated by your previous drives, but not yet connected to a new sense of purpose that feels authentic and inspiring. This void phase is actually a necessary part of the integration process. Your awakening has dissolved many of the illusions that were driving your previous goals and ambitions. You might have been pursuing success, recognition, security, or pleasure as ways of trying to fill an inner emptiness that you now realize was based on the illusion of separation. But now that you know yourself as whole and complete exactly as you are, those external pursuits no longer hold the same appeal. This creates space for a more authentic expression of your gifts and talents to emerge, but it takes time for this new direction to become clear. During this transition phase, the most important thing you can do is stay present with the uncertainty, rather than rushing to fill the void with new goals or projects. This emptiness is pregnant with possibility, and if you can learn to rest in it without anxiety, you'll discover that your true purpose emerges naturally from your awakened awareness rather than from your ego's need to achieve or accomplish something. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop taking action in the world. It means that your actions begin to arise from a deeper source of inspiration that's connected to your essential nature rather than from external pressures or internal compulsions. As you practice staying present with this void, you might notice subtle impulses or interests beginning to emerge. You might feel drawn to creative expression, service to others, learning new skills, or exploring aspects of life that you never considered before. These impulses are often the first signs of your authentic purpose beginning to reveal itself. The key is following these impulses with curiosity rather than immediately trying to turn them into grand life plans. Allow yourself to explore and experiment without the pressure of making everything into a career or major life direction. Sometimes the integration process requires a period of play and exploration before your true calling becomes clear. Many people get stuck in the integration phase because they're still approaching their spiritual development with the same goal-oriented mindset they used in other areas of life. They want to complete their integration, achieve enlightenment, or reach some final state of spiritual attainment where all their human struggles will be resolved. But integration is not a destination you arrive at. It's an ongoing process of allowing your awakened consciousness to more fully inhabit and express through your human form. There's no finish line where you suddenly become perfectly integrated and never experience challenges, reactions, or areas for growth. This process continues throughout your entire life, with each phase bringing new opportunities to embody your realization more deeply and authentically. What changes is not that you stop having human experiences, but that you develop the capacity to meet those experiences from an increasingly stable foundation of awakened awareness. You learn to surf the waves of human emotion without being overwhelmed by them. You develop the ability to engage with life's challenges without losing your connection to the peace and wisdom that exists at your core. You discover how to love and serve others while maintaining healthy boundaries and taking care of your own needs. This is what spiritual maturity looks like. It's not about transcending your humanity, but about bringing your divinity into full expression through your human experience. It's about becoming a bridge between heaven and earth, between infinite consciousness and finite form. As you progress in this integration, you'll notice that your relationship with suffering begins to transform. You don't necessarily experience less difficult emotions or challenging circumstances, but you develop the capacity to meet them with greater equanimity and wisdom. You begin to see that even your struggles and limitations serve the evolution of consciousness. Your human challenges become opportunities to embody love, compassion, and wisdom in ways that wouldn't be possible if life were always easy and comfortable. This shift in perspective transforms everything. What once felt like obstacles to your spiritual development become gateways to deeper realization. What once felt like evidence of your failure becomes proof of your courage to engage fully with the human experience while maintaining your connection to your essential nature. The path of integration requires tremendous patience, both with yourself and with the process itself. There will be days when you feel like you're making great progress, and other days when you feel like you're back at the beginning. There will be periods of rapid growth and periods where everything seems to plateau or even regress. All of this is completely normal and necessary. Integration happens in waves and cycles, not in straight lines. Your system needs time to consolidate each new level of awareness before it's ready to integrate the next layer. During the challenging phases, remember that integration is not about perfection. It's about authenticity. It's about learning to be genuinely yourself in each moment, whether that self is feeling confident or insecure, peaceful or agitated, clear or confused. The goal is not to always feel good or always respond perfectly. The goal is to remain connected to your essential nature regardless of what you're experiencing on the surface. This connection becomes your anchor, your reference point, your source of stability as you navigate the complex process of being both human and divine. As you continue this journey, you'll begin to notice that your very presence starts to have a different quality. People might comment that you seem more grounded, more peaceful, or more authentic, even when you don't feel like you're doing anything special. This is the fruit of integration beginning to ripen. Your awakened consciousness is starting to radiate through your personality, your behavior, and your way of being in the world. You're becoming a living bridge between the spiritual and material realms, demonstrating that it's possible to be fully human while remaining connected to your infinite nature. This is perhaps the greatest gift you can offer the world. Not your spiritual experiences or insights, but your lived example of what it looks like to integrate awakening into ordinary human life. Your willingness to embrace both your divinity and your humanity with equal love and acceptance becomes an invitation for others to do the same. The journey of integration is ultimately about coming home to yourself completely. It's about discovering that you don't need to choose between being spiritual and being human. You can be both fully and simultaneously, and in fact, this integration is what the world most needs from you. So if you're feeling stuck between your awakened awareness and your human experience, know that you're exactly where you need to be. This apparent stuckness is not a problem to be solved, but a phase to be navigated with patience, compassion, and trust in the intelligence of your own consciousness. Your awakening was real. Your realization was valid. And your current challenges are not evidence of failure, but opportunities for the deepest kind of spiritual work, the work of bringing heaven to earth through the vehicle of your own precious human life. Trust the process, trust yourself, and know that every step of this integration journey is sacred, meaningful, and necessary for your complete flowering as both human and divine.